Hello, good sir.
Hi, how we doing? Are we on?
We are on, man. I'm good. How you doing today?
You got, how's that? You got me?
I got you, man. You look beautiful.
Okay, thanks, Brian. How are
How
you? Where
you
are you
doing
back?
today?
You're back east somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I'm out of Florida actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's beautiful. I mean, I got the sun shining, the beaches. It's nice, man. What about you?
Well, I'm out near Calabasas, outside LA.
Okay.
Calabasas, California. It's just about 20 minutes outside of LA.
Okay. Is that more towards the water or
If you were
further in?
standing on Malibu Beach and you
Okay.
drove straight inland about 15 minutes, that's so we're just in. And we're northwest of the city.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, I don't know if you know LA, it's like what they call the west end of the valley, but it's kind of rural. It's not quite in the city, it's just outside.
Okay. Yeah, I've only been to LA twice, and then one time was for AFM. So where you know where the Lowe's
AFM is
Hotel is?
Santa Monica. I used to live in Santa Monica. Yeah, that's all down there. They've moved it, by the way. Did you know that? It's going to
I did
Las
not.
Vegas. Yeah,
It's
AFM this year, because I usually go. This year it's Las Vegas for the first time.
interesting. Why do you think they did that? Money? Okay.
Like, what? Why is every decision ever made?
It's always about the money, I guess.
Yeah, California taxes are high, hotel, food, everything is expensive here. And, in Las Vegas, they're set up for conventions. It's like what they do.
Yeah.
So, you land in Vegas, there's plenty of hotels, convention centers. I just think it's money.
Yeah. That makes sense. I
But
mean,
if
it
you're coming in from Thailand or Romania, it doesn't matter whether they fly in, to LA or to Vegas. It's the same difference.
gotcha. Yeah, and like you said, it's built for that. I mean, Vegas is you can have fun and you can, do your sales stuff and then I don't know, hit the bar after.
And party.
And then hit the crap tables. Oh man, gamble the money away. I don't know. I just not my thing, but whatever floats the boat, I guess.
It's just cheaper.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me a little bit about you, man, because so I was going through and I watched some of your movies and stuff, especially
Oh,
the ones,
wow.
yeah, especially the ones I want to talk about
Sure.
because I'm an actor producer myself, so I just love film in general. And I've done every aspect of it, on little scales and big scales, as far as like from PA work to producing to writing to like, so I just dabbled in everything and kind of find what I didn't want to do and then kind of honed in on where I want to be.
Good.
So it looks like you went to, and the reason I say that is what was your journey like in the beginning? It looks like you went to film school.
I did.
Um,
I
Okay,
did.
can you tell me a little bit about that and what led you into going to film school and why that was a decision you said, "Hey, I need to do this"?
So, yeah, and I do. This is a great opportunity to say for anybody who's interested in my story, I should be holding it up. I have this book called Still Rolling, and
Okay.
it starts in film school and goes right on through. It's published by McFarland, and you can get it on Amazon or anywhere. Still Rolling Inside the Hollywood Dream Factory.
I just bought it. Like,
Okay.
legit. I just bought it. I'm not lying either. Anybody watch it, I legitly just bought it, so I
I'm
haven't read it
happy
yet.
to talk about it. But anyway, it does go into detail. So I got the bug. I'll give you the headlines. I got the bug real early, like in eighth grade, because
Okay.
I took my neighbor's Super 8 camera. I was just messing around. And
Mhm.
I just thought it was a blast. So I got hooked early. I won a couple local kind of high school film festivals.
Uh-huh.
And then I was able to put together a couple literally little Super 8 shorts. And
Okay.
along with my academic career and so forth, I applied to a bunch of film schools. By the way, there weren't very many at that time. There was NYU, there was USC, there was a few. Now there are hundreds of film schools. Florida has several,
Mhm.
um, but it was unusual then. So I did finally. I got turned down a lot of places, but I got into USC, And then you have to do 2 years of just, math and physics and, undergrad stuff. And then in
Mhm.
your junior year, you can start taking film classes. So you have to cool your heels for 2 years. It's very frustrating because you come all this way and it's like, and what, I'm going to take a biology class? It's frustrating. I
Yeah.
could have
Let
done, I
let
could
me let me ask you this though, did it help you in any way taking a step back and learning maybe about the films or no?
Well, what helped is I was able to make in my senior year a what they call a thesis film or a graduate film,
Mhm.
and I made a short called Americano, and for whatever reason, it kind of hit, and it won some film festivals, and there were some screenings, when they would screen like up and coming student filmmakers, and it got a little bit of attention. And it came indirectly to the attention of this producer named Sandy Howard. I don't know
Mhm.
if you ever heard that name, but he, excuse me, my voice, he produced all the great B movies like Man Called Horse, Vice Squad, Deadly Force. There's like five of these guys. They don't exist now, but it was Sam
Mhm.
Arkoff, Roger Corman, who you probably heard of,
Mhm.
Sandy Howard, Nico Mastorakis, and then famously the Cannon films, the
Yeah.
Go Boys, Menachem Golan. So in that time, VHS had just kicked in,
Mhm.
and everybody was starting to have a VHS player at home, and they needed movies. And the studios weren't selling their movies to VHS. So a lot of, like, I did a Joe Don Baker movie and an Edward Albert movie and a Sally Kellerman movie, these kind of older Hollywood stars, and we would make these smaller movies.
Mhm.
But there was a little market for them. But those seat of the pants, Sam Markoff kind of producers, just that's not the business anymore. It was great then because they needed cheap talent, non-union directors, not in the guild, knew how to put a film together, but cheap. So this is how Cameron started with Roger Corman. So did Coppola, Scorsese. Arkoff was able to start Jonathan Demme. Uh,
Okay.
a lot of these big name 70s filmmakers, they started this way. I can give you the titles. Jonathan Demme did Caged Heat. Coppola did Dementia 13.
Okay.
Scorsese did Boxcar Bertha. This is terrible information to have. Um, Ronnie Howard traded his child stardom. He told Roger Corman he'd be in one of his movies if he could direct it. And
Uh-huh.
Corman said, yes, if you be in it, I'll let you direct it. It was called Eat My Dust. And so these were, you can tell by the titles, these were all drive-in
Yeah.
drive-in movies, John Milius did Dillinger. The list goes on of these people, famous people
Uh-huh.
that made these, 15-day exploitation movies. And so I was lucky enough to meet one of those guys, Sandy Howard, and he hired me to do a low budget, very low budget spy movie called KGB: The Secret War. And nothing really happened with it. I mean, it went to VHS, which was the point of it, but it gave me a reel. Do you know what I mean? I cut it down to like 7 minutes. So
Okay.
it was a really flashy reel.
Nice.
So I did get, and Sandy hired me because of my student film. So in a way, if you want to connect the dots, there was, because I didn't know anybody in Hollywood. I didn't have any cousins or uncles or, I had no Hollywood connections.
Where did you grow up?
'Cause I grew up outside of Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay. Alright, so you're definitely a long way from Hollywood, that's for sure.
I had no, my father was a small businessman. There was like no. So, and I
Yeah.
did meet people through USC. The guy who edited my student film was Josh Donnan, who was the son of Stanley Donen, one of the great classic Golden Age directors. And then Josh has gone on to produce on his own. He produced Gone Girl and a million movies. There are a couple other kids in my class that broke through, not too many, but a few.
Mhm.
But you did make relationships. So in that sense, I have to say it was, I mean, without that, who do I know? You know, I'm working at Subway if I if otherwise, right? If there was a Subway.
Oh, man. So, okay. So you have a interesting and I've heard that too because I interviewed, Darren Safarian, I think it's
Sorry,
how you
again?
him? Yeah, Sapien, yeah. Really
Yeah,
cool dude.
but
Um,
he's a great guy, but he is in fact the son of a Hollywood director.
he is, but he did tell me his dad never let him on sets, which was interesting, and he
Really?
and he said yeah, and he said he wanted us to figure it out ourselves, and he was telling me a story about how he went to, right as when you were mentioning James Cameron, he was like, "Come out to Italy. Just come out here." So he booked a flight, and as he booked a flight, he got fired. James Cameron got fired on the Piranha one,
Oh,
and he
really?
was like, "Oh shit, what am I gonna do now?" He's like, so he just, "I'll just get a job." But it was a really cool interview with him.
No,
Um,
Darren's a good guy. I know him a little. I mean, we passed ships in the night because we've both done a fair amount of television.
yeah,
Um, and but his dad was an important director. He did a couple, um, you know, sort of classic movies. Not Darren. What was his name? Ted? No. Anyway.
and I'm not sure of, to be honest with you. What Let me ask you this then. So what led, because you got, I like to focus on the action, and I
Yeah,
know
yeah.
you've got,
Please.
a wide range of different things. And one of the ones that stuck out to me first was of course, Marked for Death
Right.
with Steven Seagal. What led you to that movie? And can you tell me a little bit about, was it something you put together, or was it something that was brought to you? How did that work?
Well, I had made a franchise sequel, Halloween 4, Part 4,
Okay.
with Michael Myers, and it was a hit. It was a very unexpected hit. Everybody thought, oh, it's the fourth in a dying series. You know, nothing will ever happen with it. But it made theatrical business. It did theatrical money, and it was number one for like 2 or 3 weeks. It beat the Jodie Foster movie. We
Mm,
beat the James Caan movie. It was shocking. But anyway, people started to like who directed. You know, it was like, well, who directed it?
yeah.
And Steven saw Halloween 4 at Warner Brothers, and I'm not sure why he saw it. Maybe he was looking at one of the actors. I'm not sure. He had a deal at Warner's at that time, and he called me in and he wanted me to do a movie for him. He loved Halloween 4. And he wanted me to do a movie called Hard to Kill. Um, and I auditioned for it and everything, but the studio said, no, 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 we're not using this guy. We don't know who he is. They got a
Okay.
they got a studio director who had just done a big Stallone movie to do that, and it didn't go well. Meanwhile, I went off to Budapest to do a Robert Englund horror movie called Phantom of the Opera.
Mhm.
And when I got back, Steven decided to do a movie outside of his Warner Brothers deal, and he came back to me and said, "I still want you to do one." And then so I did get in on Marked for Death, but he was sort of my champion, and he brought me into his movies. Is really how that happened, based on Halloween.
Based on your prior work?
Yeah,
And you didn't know him, he just kinda reached out randomly, "Hey, liked your work, would love
it's
you."
all through agents and managers, but I mean, and eventually you finally get a call one day and say you have to go meet Steven at 10 a.m. at Warner Brothers or whatever, and it's like, oh, okay. So yeah,
Cracking you.
we got along, and I it was very direct with him. It's been a blessing and a curse my whole career because I don't, it's that famous line, I don't look up or down at anybody.
Mhm.
It's like just across.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I'm like, Steven, here's what I think is working for you. Here's what I think works about the script. Here's what doesn't work about the script. And he started, he got a little defensive at first, but then when he realized what I was saying, I mean, people appreciate it if they think it's true what you're saying.
Gotcha.
He's a smart enough guy to say, oh, maybe he's right. Maybe we should fix this and this. Anyway, we had a good relationship, and he, I don't know. That movie also was very unexpected. They expected it to do some theatrical
Mhm.
and then have a good life. And by now there's DVD. Is it coming in? Not quite. It's not quite DVD time. But the TV and the VHS was still important. But it was a hit. It was a big hit, and we kind of got blasted by oddly enough, the white critics.
Mhm.
But the African American audience loved this movie. And that's kind of how I got in on Murdered 1600 too, because Wesley knew about it.
I love
And
Wesley Snipes, by the way, yeah.
so it's just, it's a very, and again, well, final time I'll mention it, but all these details are in the book, and it's kind of interesting. But because my point in the book is a lot of people write about what you do on set, how do you make a movie, all those kind of questions.
Mhm.
But my book is about how do you make a whole life out of this, right? How do you do this for 40, 45 years and make it a career rather than, oh, I made a movie? Because, there's an old saying, any idiot can make their first movie. The question is, can you make a second or third or fourth? And
Mhm.
that's really where it gets, tricky because you have to make money. In the end of the day, you have to make money.
And you were able to find a career. I mean, when you did Mark for Death, you said it, surprisingly did very well. Did you have any, like, like, "Hey, I'm gonna set out to make the best movie, make the best process," or was it did in your mind, was it like, "Oh, I wanna make a hit?" Like, did you have anything like that, or were you just making a
No,
movie?
I just wanted to not make a Seagal movie, which I would never have told him.
Wh What do you mean by that? Let's see, what's that mean, like a
Because I
Seagal
wanted to
movie?
make the French Connection. I wanted to make a street cop movie, right? I
Okay.
wanted to make a gritty 70s style, like freaking cop movie, like with Popeye Doyle and car
Mhm.
chases. If you look at the car chase in Mark for Death, it's, I won't say lifted, but it's inspired heavily out of the French Connection. And
Okay.
his job is a fallen cop who's betrayed himself, and he's betrayed his oath, and he's brought back into the world because his family is attacked. There's a lot of, I mean, there's a little Charles Bronson in there. There's some Death Wish in there, but I really wanted to make this 70s movie. Now I had this 90s action. Even then, he was an icon. He had the ponytail. He
Mhm.
had he looked a certain way. He was a master of Aikido, as you know. So you didn't just do a boxing match with him. You could do guns with him because he's an excellent marksman. So
Is
you could do all. You didn't have to double him with guns or with running, jumping, all that stuff. Sometimes driving, we had to double him just because number one, you don't want to hurt him, and number
Mhm.
two, there were stunt guys who could do that a little better,
Mhm.
who could move a little better. He's famously known for kind of a funny walk. I mean, run. Yeah,
Yeah, they do say that, yeah, yeah.
he's got an odd little run.
Yeah,
But anyway, so in my mind, I was like, I'm gonna make the French Connection. I'm not telling anybody,
yeah.
but that's what I'm doing. And so I think because when I grew up in my film school days, and it was like the height of the 70s, right? So that's when it's all happening. You got Coppola, Scorsese, De Palma, Sidney Pollack, all these guys, Jonathan Demme, all working at the top of their game. And we were all, as students, so inspired.
Mhm.
So I was bringing that love of that kind of movies into what was, a B movie programmer is what they call it. But I think it elevated the material, and that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to not do it became a bone-breaking Steven Seagal movie. I mean, that's all in there,
Mhm.
but it's also about the government and drugs and corruption and vengeance, and we were very lucky because we had an amazing bad guy. You know
Mhm.
the movie, it's Screwface,
Mm.
the
Yeah.
Jama the Jamaican bad guy.
Yeah, he's definitely crazy in it. Let me ask you this then, because that seems to be a reoccurring theme with your projects, like, in fighting for injustice. Is that something close and dear to you in some way? Because I've noticed in, like, Tekken and, you know, Murder at 1600, they all have that
It's in
similar.
Rapid Fire too.
Yeah, Rapid Fire too, yeah, it was.
So, I always try and find the scene, um, of what the movie's about. Like, what's the scene that really defines the movie? And in Rapid Fire, there's a scene where Powers Booth basically schools the kid Brandon Lee
Mhm,
about what to expect from life, And there's this father son thing, and it's not like this. It wasn't as scripted. But I talked to Powers and I talked to Brandon. And I said, we really need to get into who you guys are to each other. And they didn't improv. They improved it, but then we wrote it down. In other
okay.
words, we improv the scene, then we wrote down the dialogue. I sent the dialogue to the producers and said, I'd rather shoot this.
Mhm,
Can you give me permission to not do these pages, but to shoot this instead? Because you can't just go rogue, you can't just do whatever you want. There's
yeah,
millions of dollars at stake. So we got approval, and the scene's interesting because Power says, sooner or later in life, kid, you gotta stand up for something. You gotta be for something. Because he was just angry, right? Brandon Lee's the young Jake Lowe was just anger. Hey, I'm mad at the world. I'm mad at the world because of what happened to my father. I'm bitter. I'm all rage. And so Powers Booth is like, well, that's fine, but it's easy to be against things, but you're gonna have to be for something eventually. Anyway, it's an interesting sidebar to what you were saying. That I try and find out, even in an action movie, like what is it about, and then it's easier for me to direct it.
and you'll basically what, keep everything will kinda, like, tie into that one scene that you feel is the meaning of the movie? Like, the core or
Well,
the
when
essence?
you're directing a scene and you look at the whole scene, the scene itself has a beginning, middle, and end. And by the way, I want to talk about that regarding action. But like if I come into the scene, and let's say it's about loss of confidence, like that's what this scene is about, like insecurity.
Mhm,
And so then when you rehearse the actors, you go, guys, whatever you were doing in the scene, it's about this. It's about envy. It's about jealousy. It's about fear. And then if you hold on to one idea, then as they're thinking about how should I play it, what is my blocking, how should I
mhm.
use my props, and it's like, what does this crazy director said? He said it's about, whatever, and it gives them something to think about. And
Gotcha,
once they're thinking, their performance jumps immediately because they're not saying lines, right?
got you.
You know,
Yeah,
there's a
they're adding
there's
layers. Yeah, they're adding layers to it. Okay.
well, there's a funny old story. Like if you take an actor and if he leaves the house and he stands on the sidewalk and he's confused, he could be thinking, are they going to come and murder me today? Do I owe the bank $1 million? And he's confused there for a minute before he moves on. If you tell the actor, did I leave the stove on or did I leave the stove off? You know how sometimes you leave the house and you have that minute like, oh shit, did I leave the oven on? You know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's in other words, it doesn't matter what they're thinking, but if they're thinking, the camera will read into it and you'll put on that anything that's right for the story. So he could literally be saying, did I leave the stove on or did I leave it off? and that's enough. It's really a
Yeah.
weird thing. Anyway, that's a sidebar, but
No, I love it, man. What was that like working with Brandon Lee? Because I mean, the history with his father, how does that tie in? Did you approach him? Was he already attached? How did that work?
he was, and I had to go up and meet with him and Jeff, his great stuntman, Jeff Amata. And I knew that he was a really ambitious actor. So he didn't want to be the son of Bruce. That wasn't his goal.
Mhm.
And so I was able to discuss the script with him about the character. And I never talked to him about his martial arts, right? Because I know he's got tons of experience. Jeff Amata has tons of experience. Who else did we have? We had another great stunt, our fights guy. But I had, there's people there who know about that, right? So I knew I had them. So I just talked to Brandon like an actor, not like a martial artist. And I think that's what he responded to. Like I kept saying, let's make a Dick Donner movie. Let's not make, a martial arts kung fu movie. Nothing against it. We love kung fu movies, but let's not do that. Let's make Lethal One, meaning Lethal Weapon,
Yeah, yeah.
and you're Mel, right? And let's do that. And then suddenly he's thinking differently about this kick ass fight movie, which is really what it was. But now he's thinking, okay, this director wants to make Lethal Weapon. That's interesting. You see where I'm going with this? It's like reaching above the material.
Well, I feel like you're adding so much depth to because we love action, like we love the martial arts and stuff like that. But when you have love in it, when you have a when like Rocky, when you have that love interest, when you have the hey, this happened to my mother or this happened to my father, and this is why I'm doing this. But then you have that arc of the character still where maybe he changes why he was doing that and realizes, oh, I don't have to do it because of that, right? Like those
Well,
layers
right.
I think so much.
Well, I'll get out in front of a on a location where we're going to do a big action scene,
Mm.
and I'll have a board and I'll have the little toy cars. You know how you do, and you do a lot of stunts and action, right? So,
I just started messing with the stunts, and
oh,
I
okay,
just started messing with the action. I do more I've done more smaller budget stuff, so I haven't
yeah.
got to that level yet, but yeah, I'm working there towards
Oh,
it,
well,
so
a lot of times you lay out a sequence with toys, with little toy cars, and
okay.
so people know where they are. And I'll stand there and I'll have the stunt coordinator and the ads and the stunt men and all these guys whose job it is to know how to do this stuff. And I'll sit there and I won't say, this is a cable pull, this is a tramp, this is a high fall into a pad. I don't want a cable, I want a pad. I mean, I can
Mhm,
talk that language. I know it all.
mhm,
But what I find is effective is to say, Jake gets out of the car here. There's 3 feds in these buildings. He doesn't know which one is turned. He's gotta get to Powers Booth down this alley. In order to do that, he's gotta go through a gauntlet. There should be a serious gunfight here. There's gotta be and then I'll tell him, "But here's the story. He's afraid, but he overcomes his fear." And I'll tell, like, the stunt guys this. And it's
mhm.
funny, instead of saying, "Okay, dude, do you want it to be a high fall or not?" They never like they always get interested
Really?
because now they're thinking, "I'm a storyteller, right?
Mhm.
Maybe I'm just here for a specialty stunt, maybe I'm just doing a high fall, or maybe I'm just taking a squib hit or whatever. Maybe that's why but now they're thinking I'm part of this script, right? I'm part of this story."
Yeah,
And now they start to think. I just think if you bring people in, story, everything people respond to it. There's my that's my 50 cent
I like
too.
I'm writing it down, man. Story, everything's about story,
And
even talking. Ever even talking to the stunt guys.
Yeah, when they come to me and say, "Hey, Dwight, is this a ratchet pole or a tramp?" I said, "You know what? Here's the story. The story is Diane jumps in front of a bullet meant for the president, right? That's the
Mm,
story. She's going to take one for the president, and she does. She gets shot. I said, now I'm going to be here in the hall. I got Alan Alda, and then you tell me. That's my vision. You tell me what's the best way to. I'm a director. I'm not going to tell you. You tell me, and they'll talk right amongst themselves. Okay, I see now what he wants. Right, that's what they're thinking.
yeah.
Because instead of something a line in the script, right? Agent Chance gets shot. Now they're thinking, okay, here's what's in his head, and that's my job is to just communicate, and then they can come back to me and say, we've thought about this, and a ratchet pull is the only way to go on this, and here's why. And I'll say, great, set it up. But now it's on them, right?
That's awesome. So you're saying you give them space to create, basically.
But they have to know what I want. They can't. They're not mind readers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of time the script is just kind of the blueprint. But if you tell them the scene, they can see it, and they can see what it is you're talking about, and then they can get smart. I mean, not that they're not smart. I'm just saying they can use what they know in service of the story.
Yeah, and I think it feels like too, like you're not just telling them how, like, "Hey, I need you to do this." It's more or less, "Hey, this is what I need," and like, "What do you guys think the best process to create
Well, it's
is
like
here?"
you're a
Yeah,
collaborator now. You're
that's
you're
cool.
you're on the team.
Mhm.
Bring me something. We had a scene in Rapid Fire where the car comes down the alley and Powers is shooting at it, and it blows up and it does this crazy flip. And I said, I want the shotgun to blow the shit out of this car to the point where it flips. Because in my mind, I thought we could do some kind of a pipe ramp, like
Mhm.
just a classic, what was that famous TV show, where they're always flying through the air? Help me out. Anyway, so I thought,
I'm
I,
blanking, man, I'm
what?
blanking. Dukes of Hazzard.
Yes, thank you. See, you got there. Dukes of Hazzard. So I thought they were just going to do some Dukes of Hazzard gag. But instead, they came back and said, that's not realistic. If the gas can were to go off, that's not what would happen. So here's what we're thinking. We're going to put a telephone pole in the back of this car, and we're going
Mhm.
to rig it with the driver. He's going to be in a full metal cage with a massive explosion over the telephone pole. And as he's coming down the alley, the driver himself and the right taking his own time, he pushes the release button. The explosion goes off over the telephone pole, and it thrusts the telephone pole into the pavement at unbearable force. But
Mhm.
what that does is it kicks the back of the car up and over, right? So it's
Mhm.
not this, which we see at the Dukes of Hazzard shot.
Kinda
It,
like this,
it's
yeah.
like a gas tank exploded. And the force of the gas tank, when you look at the movie again, you'll see it. It's like
Mhm.
the force of the gas tank blew the car this way. And it's unbelievable stunt. It's dangerous. But we got permission from the studio to do it. And it's insane because it's not, and they brought me that idea. I didn't know it. I didn't even know that existed. But they came to me with it. I said, well, are you out of your fucking mind? And you should go fast forward through the movie to the alley scene,
The
and
alley scene, okay.
you'll
Cool,
see the
cool.
stunt, and Powers is driving with Brandon, and then all of a sudden the gas tank explodes, and it's a crazy stunt.
How long did it take him to rig that whole get up?
So the call was at 5 p.m. It was a night shoot, and I started around the corner
Mhm.
doing I was doing some driving stuff, some dialogue, and they were rigging that part of the street from 5 o'clock. So at lunch, which is 1 in the morning, if I have my math right, so I went out and walked it with them, and they told me how what they had figured out. The how much speed. See, it's so heavy, the car, because you've got the weight of the car, the weight of the explosive, the weight of the phone pole, the weight of the crash cage, which is metal. So the weight is just astonishing. And then the driver's in there, and he's in a burn suit with a helmet on. So I had to pick angles that were very careful to hide the driver.
Mhm.
Anyway, so they showed me how much distance they needed, and then I brought the gaffer out, and then I started to light it for that, and then we continued to work around the corner till about, I'd say, 2 or 2:30. Finished our work, which is, driving and blowing out
Mhm.
tires and stuff that we were doing, and then the AD called it for what we were doing, and we all went over, and then we started working on the stunt. I think we worked on that from about 2. I think we probably pushed the button about 5, and it was light by 5:30. Do you know what I mean? It was like
Oh, wow, yeah.
it was one take. I mean, there was no going back. It was like,
That's what I was gonna ask you, so it was like a one and done thing, you had to
right,
just get
yeah,
it
it
done.
was the last thing of the night before the sun came out. You do it last. And we had, I think, maybe 5 cameras just to make sure. Um, but at high slow motion, because we were shooting film in those days, it takes an enormous amount of light to expose for that, what is it, 120, maybe even more, maybe 200 and something frames per second. In order to
Mhm.
run that kind of high speed, you just have to have all this light. So that's why we had to light this alley with heavy movie lights. Like, if you looked at it normal during the day, you'd be like, well, this is totally unrealistic. Not during, at night, because
Yeah,
it looks overlit, but we needed all that light to film at that frame rate. So anyway, look at the movie and check that out because it's really cool.
I am now. Let me so, working with Brandon, you know, um, what was he like as a martial artist? Was he really, really good? Like,
Really,
and his
really,
act
really good.
really?
Really good. Now, I had to work with him a lot with his acting. I mean, I gave him much more attention than I would give Powers Booth or somebody like that, because he
Mhm,
was young and he was raw and he was open to it because he wanted to be good. So as an actor, I worked with him. As a martial artist, I would talk to him and Jeff. Do you know this name, Jeff Amata? You should look him up. He ended up doing the Bourne movies, and he's
okay.
a top Jeff Amata. He's a top guy in the business.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but I would explain to them the same thing. It's the same story. Here's what's happening, Jeff. He's in this laundry, and the bad guys are here and here, and he's got to get past the gatekeeper, it was Al Leone at that time. And there's a famous fight at the end of Brandon Lee. It's just the two of them. And I
Mhm,
and here's what we have to work with. We had a dry cleaner. So we had all kinds of fun things. We had cages, we had towels, we had I don't know, just props and stuff to fold
mhm,
into the fight. And I told them the story of the fight, who wins at the end, who gets away, wow. And then I leave them alone and let them do their thing. And then when they have it's like a writer, when they have a rough draft, I'll come back and they'll show me what they have and say, this is what we figured out so far. And then I can say, well, I like all this, but that move I don't think works, and this could be better. Or I just give them some notes. Then they
yeah,
make the changes. But again, now that's between Jeff and Brandon, because Jeff knows everything that Brandon can do. rather than me asking Brandon to do something that's not in his wheelhouse. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Like he has to do a thing where he jumps up against a wire. It was like a cage fence, and he has to bounce off it and flip and land in a attack position, right? And we
Mhm.
didn't really want to double him for that, but Jeff knew he could do that. I wouldn't even have even asked him. You know what I mean? Because I don't know, but Jeff knew. So that's how you hire great people, and then you get everything out of them that you can. But again, you have to direct. It has to be one point of view. I mean, it has to be the director's point of view, but you got to let everybody do their thing, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense, man. Um, I mean, it definitely makes sense. Well, let's because you got a few other things here with Murder at 1600. Wesley Snipes, of course,
Right,
phenomenal actor.
right.
Um, I think probably, in my opinion, one of the most underrated just actors in general because he's like a tremendous martial artist as well.
Tremendous.
And like, yeah, and then in his acting ability, I mean, from comedy to seriousness, drama, like, I mean, just phenomenal. Was that
He-
another one where he came to you with the project, or did you already have it? What was
no,
the
I was brought to it by the studio. Um, they were looking at cuts of a family movie of all things that I had done called Free Willy 2. And
Yeah,
it was Warner Brothers, and the studio was looking at cuts or dailies or something, and they were very happy with what I was doing with that movie. And they introduced me to Arnold Colpison, who was one of the biggest producers of that time. You know, The Fugitive, Platoon, Money Train, all, he was a big deal,
yeah.
and Oscar winner. And so I worked on the script with him, and then he and the studio took me to Wesley. They wanted to do it with Wesley, so I had to go to New York to meet him. But we were able to bond, going full circle back to Mark for Death,
Okay.
because he got that that was a good action movie, and so he was interested in me because of that movie.
Hmm. Okay. What was he like to work with?
He's
I
a
mean,
very moody man, and you
is
do
he really?
yeah, you
Okay.
don't know, like, which Wesley you're gonna get. You could have a morning where he comes in at 7:30, and this guy, he's on cloud 9. "What are we doing today? And I got a great idea for this scene. What do you think?" And, he like that. Another
Mhm.
day you get he didn't come in till 10, he's almost 3 hours late. He's irritable, grumpy, confrontational, and you're like, "Whoa, which Wesley just came on the set?"
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think part of it is he did party, so I don't know. Maybe it had to do with how much sleep he got.
Mhm.
Um, but in the end, his talent just kind of overwhelms everything, because he's, like you say, if you give him a little gunfight to do, you tell Wesley what you want, he will give you that to you and more. You know, be,
Gotcha.
because he's going to hold the gun in a way that you hadn't even thought of. And there's a scene in Murder at 1600 where he's got this government, he breaks this guy's neck. And he'd worked it out with the stuntman. They knew what they were doing, but I swear to God, I thought he'd broken his neck. I couldn't. I
That's
couldn't.
when he goes in the tunnel, right? Or he's
Well,
in the
this is earlier. They're in a house, and there's this guy gets assassinated in a house. The bad Secret Service,
oh, okay,
and
when
two
they
guys
right
come in,
down, yeah.
and he's in a kitchen, and he's got two guns. He's not sure which one is hot, and then this bad guy comes in, and he grabs him, and he flips him over a counter onto the floor. Then he gets up behind him, and he just you just see him break his neck.
Yeah.
And the way the stunt guy, because they had timed this all out, but the way the stunt guy moved his head and the way Wesley sold it, I'm kidding. You see it on film and you put a sound effect in there. It's brutal. And
Yeah, it looked really good, actui. Yeah, it looked
I
really
just
good.
I just thought, holy shit. And then when I yelled cut, I'm thinking is I want to hear this guy talk. That's all I'm thinking. Just say something. And he's like, I'm good, I'm good.
Yeah,
But it was one of those scary moments where I thought, I think he just broke his neck.
it freaked you out a little bit.
It totally freaked me out. But it was because
That's
they
a
had
really good movie, by the way, man. Murder at 1600,
it's
like,
good.
really good.
It's got a lot of good stuff in it. Some
Yeah, I
good.
noticed that your directing is very tight with all your movies, I felt. Like, the
Oh, good.
pacing of your films that I've noticed that when I was watching them, like, I don't know if means anything, but it just felt they felt really paced good,
Good.
you
Yeah,
know?
I cut them so that they keep moving too.
Yeah,
Try
I
and
can
keep them
definitely tell.
moving along. It's funny, those movies, those what I call my 90s movies, they've held up in an interesting way. They find life on cable. Do you know what I mean? And
Mm,
because they run a lot on TV, people who may not even have been more than 4 or 5 years old then, they know these movies because it's been on for all these years on HBO or on Showtime or they run these movies. So people who are, my son is 22, and a lot of his friends, they weren't born in 96 or 97 or whenever that was. But
mhm.
they know those movies because they caught them on TV. It's really, I mean, it's great, but it's surprising.
Yeah, they know your work, man.
They do. The rapid fire guy, because they know Brand.
Is that what they call you? Which one are you most known for? Like, what do people come up or
It
I wouldn't
depends
say
on it depends on the age group. Depends. Like African American guys, sometimes women, but guys, they know Mark for Death. They love this movie and they know I made it. They love it. Like if I'll check into a hotel, not as much now, but there was a time where I would sign my name and the guy, especially if he was African American, would look
Oh,
up and he'd say, "You're not the Mark for Death Dwight Little, are you?" It would be like that. I go,
yeah.
"Yeah, man, that's me." So that was it. Then there's these what I call the romantic goth girls. They're like kind of opera nerd romance. Like you'd think of them as the Twilight girls. They love this Phantom of the Opera movie. They love it. The Robert Englund one. And so there's that demographic. And then it's funny. The rapid fire kids, when they were 12 or 13, so they're
Mhm.
now in their 40s, they all got together in living rooms and would watch this Brandon Lee fight film. So it's like it depends on which movie it is.
Which day of the week? That's
Yeah,
cool.
well, and depends on who you're talking to. If somebody knows my work, they know it first. Usually, it's a specific movie, and then there's the Michael Myers Halloween freaks. That goes on. That never stops.
Yeah,
It's
I'll be
like,
honest. I love the Michael Myers stuff too. I know that's not my channel or whatever, but yeah, those movies. I think I saw number 4. Is that the one with, let me see who's in that. I'll let you know if I
it's on
see.
AMC every year. They run it on AMC, so that's how people know it.
Is that the one with, I think I seen that one in
So it's
theaters.
the young Jamie Lloyd, the young Danielle Harris. She was just starting out,
I
and
remember that one, yep.
Ellie Cornell plays. It was about the two sisters, and at the end, it's famous because the little girl becomes the killer at the end on the top of the stairs. She's holding the knife at the end. It
Yeah,
has this weird twist ending that people seem to like.
I do remember that movie when I was younger. I remember watching that because I remember going in the store or something, there was a scene in the store that
He
she goes in
takes
there with.
the mask,
Yeah,
and the
I do.
mirror breaks. Yeah, that's Halloween 4.
That's definitely yeah, this definitely sticks out. We worked with somebody else together too. Um, I think you just worked with them, which I was a PA on this movie. I was a PA on Heart of the Champions, and Alex McNichol.
Oh, yeah, I don't think there's an X, right? It's Alec. But,
Al- Is it? Yeah, you might be right. Yeah.
he's but
You know
yeah,
better.
I worked with him on a very small crime movie called The Last Rampage.
Yeah,
Him and Robert Patrick and Heather Graham. Yeah, he was fantastic.
he's a nice guy. I got to drive him. I did a little driving for as a PA. I was
Right.
driving him to set. They had to go to row camp for like 2 weeks, or no, it was a week of row camp. So I was driving him every morning,
What
and
kind of camp?
it was a rowing camp. It was a rowing
Oh,
movie.
rowing, rowing, rowing.
Yeah, so they had to do a week of it, like, on set. It was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, on False River. I remember that was a fun month.
Which how to learn to I shot something in Baton Rouge, yeah.
Yeah, nice guy. And then I got to pick him up from the airport and drove him. We had like an hour drive, so we were just chatting about
Yeah,
life, Cool guy.
yeah.
Um, and then let me ask, so Broken Arrow, I mean, a legend, John Woo, of course, you got to work with him. You were an
Well
executive producer on that. What's that
well,
entail? Or
what happened there is I had an idea for a movie,
uh-huh.
called based on a missing nuclear weapon called A Broken Arrow, and I pitched it to some people at Fox, and they assigned a writer to me, and we developed it. And there was a problem. It's a little bit disappointing, but it's okay now because I was finishing Free Willy 2 at Warner's,
Mhm.
and they had to make this movie. They had to get it out by Christmas,
Okay.
and I could not contractually leave Free Willy 2 until it was delivered to the studio. And I was in the editing room,
Mhm.
and they liked the Fox really liked the script, but they needed a movie for Christmas, and they had a deal with John Woo at that time. I think he had done the Van Damme movie.
Hard
Of,
target, yeah.
of course, he'd done the movies he's famous for, the Hong Kong movies. He had done those, like Boiling Heart. What is it? He did a couple
Hard
famous
boiled, I think, was it hard
Hard
boiled?
Boiled. Yeah, he
Yeah.
did a couple very famous movies in Hong Kong, and yeah, so they put him on Broken Arrow, and so I kind of missed my chance to direct it, but they said, well, you can consult and be an executive producer, and I was like, fine. Well, and instead of doing that, I got Murdered 1600. So it worked out all right, although I would have loved to have directed it. They took a
Broke.
very they took a different approach than I was trying to do. I was trying to do this clear and present danger, like nuclear warhead movie,
Mhm.
and they wanted it to make it much more of a romp, and so that's why John Travolta's like cracking jokes all the time, and the girl on the ground was supposed to be a U.S. Park Service, like a Kurt Russell person, and they changed it to a girl, and which was fine, except that the girl they picked was not she wasn't very outdoorsy. I was always surprised at the choice. Like she was, there's who's the actress from the Terminator,
Oh, shoot. I know who you're talking about.
yeah, but she's very like she can do
Linda
anything.
Hamilton.
Huh?
Linda, Hamilton?
Linda Hamilton, yeah. So she wasn't that type. And I thought, okay, well, if you're gonna do that, you need kind of a Sigourney Weaver or Linda Hamilton type who's really capable. And they picked somebody who just I thought was my only beef with the movie. I thought that's a park ranger. I'm not,
What if they wanted to give the feel of, like, her being, like, just fumbly a little bit, like a, Barney Fife, you
it's
know?
funny. It's funnier, and it's lighter, And and they had all kinds of crazy action in it, but it's it's fun cartoon action, and John Travolta knew exactly what movie he was in
Yeah, he
because
played a character
he
all the way in that.
played it very funny.
Yeah.
Volvo, the safest car in the world. just very like a villain with a capital V.
Um,
Hit me with one other question, then we'll.
where can they find you? Where's the best place to find you?
Thank you
Where you
for
located?
asking. So there's a website. It's dwightlittledirector.com,
Okay.
and that's got clips. It's got information. It's very informative. And
Mhm.
then if they go to Amazon or any of those places, they can pick up Still Rolling Inside the Hollywood Dream Factory, and they can dive into, and what that, we didn't even touch television. What that book does is really explain the difference between directing for film and for television, which I think people need to know.
I love it, man. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, I bought it, so I'll be reading it.
Okay.
It's supposed to be here tomorrow.
I
So,
love it. I love it.
um,
Thank you. Thank you for getting it.
yeah,
But
and thank you for taking your time, man. I appreciate you.
all right. Well, good luck with this podcast.